Mad cow disease and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease look like this and are caused by prions. They can be transmitted by eating tacos made from cow brains or by consuming human flesh. Prions are one of the strangest things in nature. They are so unusual that studying them has been very challenging, and to this day, there are many things we don't know about them. Here's what we do know. Let's go from macro to micro. Prions affect both humans and animals, causing erratic behavior in animals. Many of them end up killing themselves by smashing their heads against rocks or trees. The largest outbreak in humans occurred in Papua New Guinea last century, where a tribe known as the Four traditionally consumed the remains of their deceased loved ones. They believed that eating the remains would pass on the blessings and abilities of the deceased. Generally, men ate the muscles of the deceased, while women and children consumed the brain and other organs. These acts of cannibalism eventually had severe health consequences due to the consumption of human brains, as the tribe began to develop kuru, a disease that looked like this. It became so common that by 1950, it was the leading cause of death among women in the tribe. This disease is not limited to the Four tribe. You might recall mad cow disease, where eating cow brain tacos could have terrible consequences. These diseases are neurodegenerative, and in humans, the disease can take 5 to 20 years to incubate, but once it starts to manifest, everything progresses much faster. Initial symptoms include headaches and joint pains, progressing to uncontrollable tremors, speech deterioration, and loss of muscle control. Eventually, the person loses coherence and their ability to speak and move, becoming unable to care for themselves, eventually falling into a coma and inevitably dying. This process from the appearance of the first symptoms to death usually takes about a year. As the title suggests, there is no vaccine, medicine, or treatment for this. The only cure is death. All these symptoms are caused by brain deterioration known as transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. In simple terms, this means the brain turns into a sponge and is contagious. Yes, the brain turns into a sponge. The nervous tissue is affected, and holes form in the brain. These holes occur due to the death of neurons. Neurons begin to die because of the accumulation of protein plaques, which block synapses and eventually kill the cell. When groups of neurons die, certain functions are compromised, which we see as symptoms. For example, if the speech area is damaged, this capacity deteriorates for the individual, as does coordination and muscle movement. So, protein plaques damage our brain. But where do they come from? And what are they doing there? These proteins accumulating and damaging the brain are prions. Finally, we've reached the main character of the story, prions. Prions are infectious protein particles, meaning proteins that can infect. You might wonder, how can proteins infect? Proteins aren't supposed to infect, and scientists studying them are just as confused as you are. This isn't normal. In fact, a scientist won a Nobel Prize for discovering that proteins can infect. Proteins are inanimate objects. It's as strange as saying a rock is chasing you. It doesn't make sense. It's an object and shouldn't be able to do that. You might also wonder, what's the difference between a bacterial or viral infection and an infection by a protein, especially considering viruses aren't considered living organisms either. Proteins obviously aren't considered alive either, hence the rock analogy. So, what's the difference between a virus and a prion? Viruses contain genetic material and use the machinery of the cells they infect to reproduce. We can think of a virus as a robot with a manual containing instructions to build replicas of itself, which enters a factory or cell to use the materials and machines there. But prions don't work that way. Prions are just misfolded proteins, nothing more. To understand this, let's quickly review proteins. Proteins are chains of amino acids, of which there are 20 different ones used by organisms. Amino acids are linked by peptide bonds to form chains, which are proteins. This linear representation is called the primary structure of the protein, making it easier to remember the amino acid sequence and write it down. However, this isn't how proteins exist in reality. Proteins fold themselves to perform their functions. Every protein has a very specific three-dimensional shape. These amino acid chains fold based on electrostatic interactions within the molecule and its interaction with its environment. We have proteins that fold into fibers and others that fold into globules. There are thousands of different shapes. The amino acid chain hasn't disappeared, it's still there. If we stretch this curly shape, we return to the initial chain. The shape each protein takes is extremely important. If it doesn't fold into this specific shape, it can't function normally in our bodies. Proteins called PRP are found in cell membranes throughout the body, including neurons. Although their role isn't fully understood, they are known to be involved in myelin formation and intracellular signaling. These proteins generally do their job without causing any issues. The problem arises when some of these proteins, for unknown reasons, decide to change their three-dimensional shape and become malefactors. This occurrence is very rare, and you have about the same chance of being struck by lightning as developing prions in your brain. As we mentioned, the shape of proteins is extremely important, and when they lose this shape, they can't function. This is already a problem, but prions take it to the next level. A prion can infect other PRP proteins, converting them into prions and causing them to misfold and subsequently misfold other proteins. This occurs as an exponential chain reaction, eventually resulting in so many prions that they start accumulating, forming plaques, which then lead to neuron death and all the symptoms we discussed earlier. Again, there is nothing that can cure us of misfolded proteins. Most diagnoses occur post-mortem. However, the probability is low, although never zero. Moreover, this disease is also transmissible. When we consume the brains of animals or humans with prions, these prions can cross the blood-brain barrier and trigger the same chain reaction, misfolding our healthy proteins. This is why we must be very careful if we ever feel tempted to eat someone or if we are going to consume tacos. We should ensure they come from places that source high-quality products. Prions are fascinating and still hold many secrets, and we are sure to have new discoveries about them soon, which will literally blow our minds.